Welcome to Greenable Woodbridge. I am your host, Carolyn Ehrlich, and today we are with Captain Al, who's the director of the restoration at the American Littoral Society. And why he is here is because you have been working for a couple of years now on our living shoreline. And just to remind our viewers, those who watch us regularly, a couple of years ago, we actually went out to Captain Carlson Park and the Boynton Beach there and looked at where the living shoreline is going to go with Dr. Chris Abrupta from the Rutgers Cooperative Extension Water Resources. Long name for a great guy. And so now, 2 years later, we're back to talk about the progress and to remind people about this really exciting project that we're doing here in Woodbridge and Sea Warren. So what exactly is a living shoreline?
Well, good question. So a living shoreline, it's kind of a natural edge. And what we do is when we restore into a living shoreline, we're adding living components. So we're adding plants. So Captain Carlson Park, for instance, we're adding marsh grass, we're adding dune grass to kind of stabilize that shoreline. We're adding sand. That's another natural element because things live within the spaces of sand grains, believe it or not.
Right.
And then we're also adding rock. That's another kind of a hybridized piece. So it would be a sill put in there in front. And I can explain it more as we go through it. But it's taking these natural components, these natural elements, and tying them all together to build up on that and improve that resiliency, not just for the ecology of it, but for the community too.
It's a great project. And so you have been working with Rutgers, you have a team, and so it's two great teams working together. Can you tell me a little bit about that partnership?
And Woodbridge.
And Woodbridge.
Don't forget about those guys. Yeah. It's been great so far. You know, we've had a few different technical advisory committee meetings, which is just kind of the core partners. And then we've had 2 stakeholder meetings.
Oh, yeah.
And at the library, you know, and we're seeing now that they're being even more attended than in the beginning. So we're starting to get some interest and some momentum in this project, which is really great. But working together, just kind of figuring out what are the components, reassessing what Rutgers designed in the beginning, tweaking it a little bit, and based on, we did a boat wake study out there for commercial vessels.
Talk about that. That to me was fascinating.
Yeah, it's really cool. So we had, Rutgers had an app that they sent to us. I don't know if it's theirs or not, but it actually tracks commercial vessels going up and down the kill. So you kind of know when it's coming, what direction it's coming, the speed of that vessel, and we can see if that's one of the erosionary forces on that shoreline. Because if it is, then we need to adjust that design to take that out. Originally thought we might see these huge wakes coming in from these commercial vessels, but it turns out that that's not one of the big components that's eroding that shoreline.
What is causing the wakes?
Yeah, well, the boats are, but I think the erosion is more from small vessels coming out from the marina a little up creek, but also
boats.
probably nor'easters, you know, so some of that. So you have that wind that's coming down and it's kind of taken away from your shore, because the way your shore is eroded, you can kind of see the forces that are on that. Then we take that information to Rutgers and they design accordingly. Now we still may have to go back out there once we design it and tweak it a little bit, because we're going to watch it and monitor it. And that's going to be by permit probably that we have to monitor for at least 5 years.
Wow. So I've been, as I listen, we have lots of conference calls, or actually Zoom calls, where all of you scientists and Tom Flynn, who's my better half in sustainability, talk about how much sand should we put out and how much of this and that. And I call it a scientific engineering marvel. So much of it, you know, it's so difficult for a layperson like me to understand, but it's a true science. So can you explain a little bit of how you decide what's going to be where, how much, and the role that the environment plays there?
So what we're doing in Woodbridge at Captain Carlson Park, it's pretty traditional type of a living shoreline. So like I said in the beginning, it starts with a sill. A sill is basically rock piled up in front of the eroding beach. By regulation, we can go outside of what's called the 1977 Tidelands Claim Line. So that's where the shoreline was in 1977. It's not there anymore.
No.
But we can build beyond that with the sill to kind of break down the wave energy. So that's the first thing. So when you have the winds and the nor'easters and stuff blowing through, they're going to create some chop. There's not a lot of fetch on the kill, but things are happening. So we break down that energy. What happens then is if there's any kind of sediment or anything in solution, it's going to drop out. And it's going to actually naturally build back some of that beach too. Not that much here, but so then the next step would be, we talked about this earlier, coconut fiber logs. And we said before, it's coconutty what we can do with these kind of things, but technically we would do a line of coconut fiber logs along the 77 line, which is probably going to push right next to that sill. Then we're going to put, if you look at it now, you can see towards that marina, there's marsh grass there. So that's the next piece. So you're going to have marsh grass behind that. That also breaks down energy of wave, okay? But it needs to be inundated, with the tides. And then behind that would be some beach. Right. And then we were looking at going up where that bulkhead is and covering that with sand and planting that and creating more of a vegetated berm. So you're mixing all these different ecotones and ecosystems together to make it more holistic.
Now, I don't want to raise people's expectations. When you say there's going to be a beach, it's not, I'm assuming it's not going to be like it was back in the days when the Boynton Beach was a resort site.
No, it's not a sunbathing beach or something like that, but we wanted to incorporate a path that would be some of sand as well, so people can walk their dogs or actually get down into that nature, and really see what's happening there. Because you're going to see herons, egrets, all kinds of cool birds coming in there eventually. You'll probably see different little crabs. Fish are going to congregate there as well, and it's going to be really cool habitat, and people really want to get down with that. I think since pandemic, we've really seen communities and residents and just individuals getting back to nature. They want to be outside. They want to experience that. It's good for you, stress-free kind of a thing.
Absolutely.
So that's what this is going to be more dedicated to. So it still has passive recreation, but at the same time, it's for resiliency, aesthetics. I think that just the vegetated berm, once it takes off, and these things take time, so just want to warn you, when we first build it, it might not look so pretty, but give it time. Nature takes time to build itself. So in about 2 years, maybe 3, it's going to be all established and built out, and you'll see how that really takes on. It looks great. And we may have to come back and do some replantings and things like the second year. And that's why when we've talked before, we're really hoping to involve the school.
I was just going to ask you, tell us about that. How are you going to involve the community?
So part of restoration to me, it's not just restoring the habitat to some kind of, it's very difficult to find out what that timeline is of where you're restoring it back to. So, but the other pillar to restoration is outreach. And that's education, volunteerism, getting people involved in this project, because then they become the stewards. That's their project now, you know, and they also become the storytellers. So as they go through these kind of projects and they're working on it, and they're planting the plants and they're monitoring it, they tell that story to others, like, hey, guess what we did? And here it is. So that kind of is a pillar of restoration. It carries on that legacy of what you did. If we just came out there and didn't involve anybody in the community, it'd be forgotten.
Nobody would even know it's there.
It'd be forgotten, you know? And like I have some other projects where I still have residents call me and email me, hey, I just saw this. So we go down and do, the 2 big words in restoration to me is adaptive management. So we go down and we actually look at this project. We don't just one and done and we're out of here. You're with that project for a good span of time. And you're tweaking it, you're making sure that everything is configured the way it should be, because Mother Nature isn't always what you see on paper. That's for sure. So when we have plans drawn out, we say, here's what we're going to do. We might actually do some of that adaptive management while we're building it, just because it's not working.
See it, right.
Right.
That's good that you can do that. That's almost like a life skill, adaptive management.
It is, and the fortunate thing is it came through the regulatory agencies now to say, yes, adaptive management. So we don't necessarily have to go back and do a whole new permit. We just communicate and say, hey, you know what? We want to do this and move this 10 feet or 5 feet here. Can we do that? And because this isn't working. And they say, you can. That's adaptive management. So that kind of expedites the process of, really getting the project done.
And that's why you call it a living shoreline.
Oh yeah, it's living and breathing.
If it's alive, you do have to adapt it, and you do have to nurture it.
Oh yeah.
To keep it alive.
Yeah, and I mean, the benefits of a living shoreline versus, say, if you just wanted to put up a bulkhead.
Right.
Whatever wave action you have that's coming through there, or whatever elements are affecting it, it can do more damage. So a bulkhead, it'll reflect wave. When it reflects any kind of wave, that energy, it's actually taking out some of the sediment stuff below it and scouring. It's called scouring out. And then it doesn't absorb that energy.
Right.
With a living shoreline, it's almost like it embraces the nature. And as that energy comes, it's taking that energy and utilizing it, for better.
That is fantastic. And the cost, how does that compare to building a bulkhead?
So it's way less.
Way less. That's always a good thing.
Yeah, and I mean, you're not gonna have the community engaged in a bulkhead. They're not gonna go out there and pound piles and do that kind of stuff, but they are gonna go out there and plant. Maintenance fees, not much at all on a living shoreline. Once it takes off, it's established. But in the beginning, on the front end, you have to nurture it a little bit and make sure. I mean, you might get lucky and have a whole season of no storms. Oh, okay, now everything's gonna. But in the face of climate change and what we're seeing now, these storms,
you could be in trouble.
They're more periodic. So we're seeing storm after storm. I mean, that was just evident with the past couple weeks with all the storms that got hit. So that's when you have to come back and address some of the issues there.
And learn from the storms and how to adapt.
Yeah, so with Captain Carlson's Park, that living shoreline, you've got, like I said, the sill to break down the wave energy, the grass to break down more wave energy, the beach and the berm to absorb all that energy. So it's all working in concert together. So it's like a symphony out there,
That's terrific. That's a beautiful way to put it. Well, we're going to take a break right now, and I'm going to bring Julie in, who's going to talk about involving the community in the living shoreline.
Perfect.
So thank you so much, Dr. Al, for being here today, and Captain Al, I'm sorry.
I'll take doctor.
And, I look forward to continue to work with you and Tom and the whole team on this project.
We do too.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We'll be back in a minute. Welcome back. Now I'm with Julie Schumacher, who is the coordinator, the Habitat Restoration Coordinator for, I have to read this, for the Littoral Society. And you have an exciting job, and I can't wait to talk about it, because one of the things that you do, you involve recycling and you involve the community, and you have a great program going that's called Shuck It, Don't Chuck It. And I can't wait to talk about that, but let's talk about you a little bit first. How did you get involved in this, and what role do you play?
Sure. So thank you for having us. So I've been with the organization for 10 years, but 8 years full-time. I was an intern, so a summer intern back in 2014 when I was in college for environmental science. I went to Stockton, and I got an email from a professor, and it said, hey, there's this intern opportunity on Sandy Hook. And I was like, I live right by Sandy Hook. I went out there, had the interview, fell in love with the organization, with the people who worked there. And after the internship, I made some friends, coworker friends, and they wanted to keep me on board. And I really got to learn what Captain Al does with the Habitat Restoration Program. And I said, this is actually a real job, like you could do this. So I like blew my mind. And since then, I just worked my way into it. And thankfully, I've worked for 8 years under Captain Al. And I love every day. Every day is different. Some days you're in the office, some days you're in your waiters. So
I
love
love when internships actually lead to a career, and a career in the same place where you interned. We have a couple of people here in Town Hall who started out as interns.
Yep.
One of them is already a deputy director.
That's amazing.
And it's great.
From the ground up, you know, and we all contribute and work hard, everyone is all equals there. So I always encourage kids coming in through school. We have student volunteers, and I say, hey, you could be me someday, working, doing what you love.
So I didn't ask this question with Captain Al, and I probably should have, but can you tell us a little bit about the mission of the American Littoral Society?
Absolutely. So we've been around since 1961. And our three main focuses are education, advocacy and conservation or restoration. We were founded by a group of divers who wanted to connect what they found under the water to people above the water.
Oh, cool.
And we started an underwater naturalist publication that still exists today. We still have the first edition, and now who knows, we're up in the hundreds. And yeah, we're on Sandy Hook. We have offices in Millville, down in Delaware Bay area. We have Jamaica Bay. We have volunteers in other areas of the coast. But yeah, our goal is to advocate for the coast, to educate students about what's going on, especially in underprivileged areas of the state, to bring people to the coast. And then we like to help rebuild it and stabilize it, so for future generations.
And this project is fits right into your mission
Yes,
so
absolutely.
perfectly. Now, one of the parts of the Living Shoreline that I've been very excited about is that it involves the community in
Yes.
so many ways. So let's start off by talking about the role of shells
Sure.
and just how you include them and what the benefits are of
Sure.
using shells.
Yeah, so as Captain Al mentioned, a project is just a project until you involve the community. So it's always a huge aspect for us is to incorporate the people who live there, have the community feel empowered about the project that is implementing, because after we leave, it's going to be your project, so it's for the people, and to have them involved is huge. As mentioned, I run a program called Shuck It, Don't Chuck It, which is a shell recycling program. Along our coast, we have restaurants everywhere who sell shellfish. So that's our bivalves, which are our clams, our oysters, our mussels, our scallops. And oftentimes that waste just goes to landfills.
Which we don't want.
Which we don't want. Interestingly, at restaurants, that tends to be the heaviest bulk waste in their in the total waste at the end of the day, because it's so heavy.
Right.
So the restaurants get charged more typically for that waste removal. So we've found this, and the shell itself is it's calcium based. So lots of critters, other bivalves, baby organisms need that substrate to grow, to stick to get vitamins from. And what we've done is we've taken all of these oysters and clams and things out of the water, but we never put them back into the water for future, generations of organisms to use. So this is a full encompassed program where we go to restaurants who sell shell on their menu. And rather than it go to a landfill, we teach the staff to put it into buckets, so 5-gallon buckets rather than the trash. We come by, we pick it up, we bring it all the way up to Sandy Hook, I guess for you guys down to Sandy Hook. And then it has to sit in the sun for a certain amount of time to cure, so it gets all the bacteria and things off of it, so it's safe to go back into the water. And then we can utilize it in multiple ways. We could put it in different kinds of bags to create reefs. We can crush it and make paths. We can use it in the sills. So Captain Al mentioned there's a rock sill. So we'll actually put shell
put it
into
in
it.
between the rocks.
Yeah.
And
And
I
that
was
creates
wondering how you attach it. I was like, what do you do with these shells? But now I'm understanding better.
So there's different containers or ways to hold it in place. We have reefs that are subtidal reefs where we just dump it into the bay, and we have a plot area. But these are different. So this is actually going to be a controlled reef segments. And that's going to invite organisms to use it, because rock doesn't really serve too much purpose. But when you have that organic material, the shell material, you're more likely to attract organisms and create a better ecosystem or habitat for them.
And that's one of the things that we haven't really touched on is recreating that ecosystem and restoring the habitat.
Absolutely.
And so that is a great benefit, and people will probably be seeing fish and little animals and things that they haven't seen
Sure thing.
forever. So that's terrific. Now, tell me about the sip and shuck, and how does one of those work?
Sure. So related to, again, outreach, like Captain Al said, is to get people to understand why we're recycling the shell and what the purpose is, and to make some fun out of it. Because honestly,
Everything
shell
has to be fun.
recycling isn't the prettiest thing. You know, you're your waste management in a way, but to make it fun and interactive for people and to understand why we're doing it, we host things called sip and shuck events. So these are kind of like social educational events where we invite community members. We typically do it at a participating restaurant who recycles their shell with us, or any community business that's fit. And we start with an education about the society and what the program does. Then we actually have Barnegat Oyster Collective, which is our aquaculture partner. And what we want to do is focus on that economy, because New Jersey used to have huge outputs of shell, used to grow shell and then sell it. And that it's been gone for about 100 years. So these guys, Barnegat Oyster Collective and others like them, they're rebuilding that economy. So we actually have people from Barnegat Oyster Collective come to these events. They talk about their role.
I thought we had to eat clams and then clean them.
Well, they teach, so they talk about their work, bringing back that economy and that industry in New Jersey. And then they teach you how to actually shuck an oyster. So they provide you with a shucking knife, a towel, and some brochures of education material. And everyone gets a glass of wine or champagne. You get a certain amount of oysters to shuck. And you get to learn a task, like a new trait, something that most people don't know how to shuck oysters. You get to enjoy them, and you get to have us around and talk about it. So
that's terrific.
There's some wine, there's some oysters, educational information, and then you can find ways to get involved and volunteer for programs and projects like that we run.
So I actually, in about an hour, have a meeting with one of our actually active restaurants, always wanting to give back to the community.
Wonderful.
So I can describe this as we would supply a bucket for him.
Sure.
And we'll give him the instructions on how to save all the shells and everything, and then it gets picked up.
Yeah, so it's unique with each restaurant, because we want to work around their capabilities. So different restaurants have different output of shell and different capacities. So sometimes they might be too busy, and we don't want to overwhelm them, give them more work to do.
Right.
So we try to make it as easy as possible. So we would come with educational information, quick couple brochures. If there was a chance, we could meet with some of the head servers and the kitchen staff, because those are typically the people who are dealing with the shell, not always the owner. It's typically the behind the scenes, the kitchen staff. And we just explain to them, as you bring in, your bus trays or, your trays with dishes, here, this bucket will be right here. Instead of dumping it in the trash, you're going to dump it over here. And it's just that educational, quick process.
Do they have to clean it or anything?
They don't have to do anything. They just have to put the shell in our bucket. And then typically what happens is if they have a freezer in the back that has extra space, we lid it, or they will put the lid on the bucket, put it in the freezer, and we'll set up a coordination of what days would work for them twice a week for us to come and pick up those buckets. And with the lid on it and in the freezer, there won't be a smell issue or any issue. And whatever works for them. So if they say a certain day works best, we will come on that day and we'll collect the buckets, and then we weigh it. So we know exactly how much shell we've recycled from that restaurant throughout the year.
And we need to have those numbers anyway for our recycling
exactly.
numbers.
So we know how much we could put back. So I believe last year we had about 10 restaurants in the Monmouth County region, and we've recycled about 46,000 pounds of shell.
So now I have a goal to be.
Well, that's a lot of restaurants.
Right. Yeah, and there's a lot
year.
down in Monmouth County.
Right. Some restaurants have 1 bucket. Some restaurants have 30 buckets. So it's just depending on how much output they have.
That is great. And one last thing, because we forgot to talk about the students.
Yes.
So could you talk about that a little bit?
Absolutely. Again, back to outreach and getting that community empowered and interested in what we're doing. We typically, whenever we have a project in a township, we have a curriculum that we go to the schools and teach the kids. So we'll teach them about oysters and water quality and how oysters help clean our waters. We'll teach them about living shorelines and why they're better for the environment than things like bulkheads. We could all kinds of different curriculum lessons, and we like to do hands-on things. And then we like to get their hands, wet and dirty. We want to get them out there and see what it's like to be in the field, and do field work. So if we do the plantings, the marsh or the dune grass plantings, or if we're looking to see, if the critters, the crabs and mussels and things are growing in the ecosystem we've recreated, we'll get them down there and doing monitoring just like we do. It's just a fun way for them to kind of be a scientist for a day. So whether we're in the classroom teaching them about what we do, or if we bring them out in the field physically doing what we do, it gets them involved and excited. And maybe with the shell recycling, we could have a competition of which school can recycle the most shell, or
oh, cool.
Because then they go back to their parents and they get to say, hey, we should recycle shell, because it's a competition. And it gets kids
Everybody
involved.
loves competition.
Anything that gets them involved and excited and feeling like they're part of the project is what we try to do.
That's terrific. This is going to be great for the environment and great for the community. So thank you for coming and talking to us. And thank you for watching and being part of the excitement and part of the change.